Hollywood spent the 70s burying the best World War II movies under mountains of prestige drama, boring epics, and fake patriotism. But these films didn't play nice. One of them got banned in the US. Another was so intense it nearly ended its director's career. And number 3 might be the most violent war movie ever shown in theaters. These are the 15 greatest World War II films from the 70s, ranked from worst to absolute best. Following up a stone-cold classic is never easy, and Force 10 from Navarone makes that painfully clear. The original Guns of Navarone from 1961 had Gregory Peck, David Niven, and Richard Harris. In this one, the characters come back, but with a whole new cast. Robert Shaw takes over for Peck, Edward Fox for Niven, Harrison Ford steps in for Harris. Right out the gate, the film throws in footage from the original, just to remind you what it's trying to live up to. Explosions, Germans panicking, cliffs crumbling, it's all there in a quick recap. And then it moves on, with almost nothing else connecting it to the first movie. The script is by the numbers. The plot is basic. Shaw and Ford are blowing up a dam to take out a German bridge. It hits every single war movie cliché in the book, but it does throw in a decent twist during the dam explosion sequence. You also get some nice old-school effects before the credits roll. Despite all that, it didn't really land. Critics weren't kind, and even with Ford and Shaw headlining, audiences didn't think much of it either. Roger Ebert especially had no patience for it. He said it felt like Guy Hamilton, who directed a bunch of Bond films, cranked this one out in his sleep. And for Ebert, the real tragedy was that Robert Shaw spent part of his final year making it. The good news is, it's still a solid late 70s war film. Not groundbreaking, but if you've got a soft spot for this era, or for Alistair MacLean's stuff in general, it delivers enough to be worth a watch. Gregory Peck in full uniform playing General Douglas MacArthur sounds like a home run, and performance-wise Peck nails it. He even landed a Golden Globe nomination, but the film itself is a bit of a mixed bag. Directed by Joseph Sargent, same guy who made The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the movie tracks MacArthur's career from the end of World War II through the Korean War, and finally to that very public clash with President Truman. It's a solid overview, and visually it hits the right notes, but the script plays it way too safe. John Wayne turned the role down, and George C. Scott passed too because he felt it was way too close to Patton. That left Peck, who stepped in and gave the performance everything he had, even if the movie around him didn't quite rise to the same level. Peck wasn't thrilled with the production, but he later said it was still one of his favorite roles. That tells you a lot. The man respected the character and what he stood for, even if the movie didn't go as deep as it probably should have. Jakob the Liar is based on Jurek Becker's best-selling novel and takes place in a Jewish ghetto in Nazi-occupied Poland. It follows Jakob Haim as he tries to lift the spirits of those around him by pretending he has a radio, something that was a serious crime under Nazi rule. The idea is simple. Jakob hears news that the Russians are advancing, and he starts spreading hope. At first, it's just to cheer people up. But as things escalate, he keeps doubling down on the lie, because at that point, hope is the only thing they've got. The film was made in East Germany, and it's the only East German production ever nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. It also competed for the Golden Bear at Berlin, and critics who saw it at the time were deeply moved. German newspapers said the film told its story gently, softly, without cheap sentiment, and a lot of that came down to the subtle, grounded performances. But being an East German film during the Cold War meant it didn't get much of a shot in the US. It was effectively blocked from American screens, didn't get a proper release here for years, and even then, only in tiny art house screenings. It was blacklisted for where it came from, not for what it showed. Most World War II films focus on Allied prisoners escaping from German camps, but the McKenzie Break flips that around. This time it's the Allies trying to stop the Germans from breaking out. Brian Keith plays an Irish officer in the British Army, brought in to investigate a group of German prisoners of war at a camp in Scotland. These guys aren't just sitting around waiting for the war to end. They're up to something, and at the center of it all is a slick, calculating U-boat commander. It turns into a psychological chess match, with Keith trying to figure out what the Germans are planning before it's too late. Lamont Johnson directed this one, He later made the cult sci-fi oddity Space Hunter. But here he keeps things grounded and tense. The setting, the pacing, the quiet build-up, it all adds to the feeling that something is constantly just under the surface, waiting to blow. This one's often overlooked, but it's a smart, well-made thriller that shows a different angle of the war most films ignore. Here's one from Robert Aldrich, the same guy who gave us The Dirty Dozen and Alzana's Raid, so you already know he doesn't do anything halfway. Cliff Robertson plays an American translator stuck in a British unit with Michael Caine leading the charge. Their mission is to take out a Japanese communications station on a remote island. It starts off like it might be another ensemble war picture, but by the second half, it turns into something else entirely. It's basically one long chase sequence, gritty, tense, and surprisingly brutal. Michael Caine brings his usual edge to it, and Cliff Robertson plays the reluctant hero well, and Denholm Elliott, Marcus Brody from Raiders of the Lost Ark, shows up in a sharp supporting role that adds a bit more texture. It didn't get the love it deserved at the time, but this is one of those rugged, down-and-dirty war films that holds up better than most. Mike Nichols took a big swing here. He teamed up with Buck Henry, who wrote The Graduate and Get Smart, to adapt Joseph Heller's novel. And the result is a war satire that doesn't always work, but it's never boring. Alan Arkin plays Yossarian, a pilot who's trying to get declared insane so he can stop flying missions and stay alive. Around him is this rotating cast of absurd, dysfunctional characters, and every scene is just a little off. That's the point. The cast is ridiculous in the best way. Orson Welles, Martin Sheen, Jon Voight, Anthony Perkins, Bob Newhart, it's stacked. And even though the tone jumps around, the film captures the chaotic, upside-down logic of the novel. It's messy, it's uneven, but there's something kind of hypnotic about it. George Clooney tried to remake it as a miniseries in 2019, but the original still has that strange 70s energy you just can't replicate. Kelly's Heroes is not here to teach you history. It's a World War II movie, sure, but it's more of a groovy 70s war heist mashup than a traditional combat film. Somehow that worked in its favor. It ended up becoming a cult favorite, and it's easy to see why. Clint Eastwood plays the straight-faced leader of a group of American soldiers sneaking into Nazi-occupied France, not to liberate anything, but to steal a pile of gold bars. They're joined by Telly Savalas and Donald Sutherland, both of whom bring their own weird flavor to the mix. Savalas is actually playing a kind of sympathetic soldier this time, while Sutherland shows up as this totally out-of-place hippie tank commander who looks and sounds like he wandered in from a completely different movie. But somehow it works. He's one of the most entertaining parts of the whole thing. Eastwood later said he was disappointed in how MGM recut the film. A lot of scenes were deleted, scenes that gave more depth to the characters and made the story stronger. So what we ended up with was a studio-trimmed version of a film that could have been a lot more layered. But even with that, it's still a wild ride. Midway is old-school, all-star, straight-faced war filmmaking. No shaky cams, no CGI fireballs, just a big, serious retelling of the Battle of Midway, loaded with famous faces and a lot of tactical exposition. You've got Charlton Heston, Glenn Ford, James Coburn, Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, all in one film. And on the Japanese side, you've got some real heavy hitters too, like Toshiro Mifune, who worked with Kurosawa, and James Shigeta, who most people now remember as Takagi from Die Hard. This version of Midway is still miles ahead of the 2019 one. It actually takes time to explore what the major players were thinking, both American and Japanese. You can feel the filmmakers trying to get the details right. Ships, strategy, chain of command, it's all there. That said, the movie slows way down when it gets lost in side plots and character backstories. There's a romantic subplot thrown in that nobody asked for, and it just gets in the way. Still, for people who actually care about how the Pacific Campaign was fought, this one delivers. It's not flashy, but it respects the material, and for this genre, that goes a long way. This one's a bit different. You've got a World War II thriller where the main characters are Nazis. The plot follows a German commando unit sent to England to kidnap Winston Churchill. Michael Caine and Robert Duvall play the leads, and yes, it's a stretch watching them try to pass for Germans. But once you're past that, there's a solid film underneath. It starts off slow, but the second half picks up with some strong action and tension. It was directed by John Sturges, the same guy who did The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven, so expectations were high. But behind the scenes, it was a bit of a mess. Michael Caine wrote in his autobiography that he was thrilled to work with Sturges, until the guy casually told him he was only doing movies at that point to fund his deep-sea fishing trips. Caine said once the shoot wrapped, Sturges took his money and disappeared. Just packed up and left. The film turned out okay, but Caine always felt like it could have been so much better with a director who actually cared. It's one of those cases where everything should have worked. The cast, the concept, the crew, but what we got was a pretty good movie that stops just short of being great. This is one of the most accurate depictions of Pearl Harbor ever put on screen. It doesn't just hit the big moments, it nails the technical detail, the build-up, the politics, the strategy, all of it. And the way the film splits the narrative between the American and Japanese perspectives gives it an authenticity that most war films never even attempt. The American side was directed by Richard Fleischer, same guy behind Soylent Green and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. For the Japanese side, they brought in two powerhouse directors, Toshio Masuda, known for space battleship Yamato, and Kinji Fukasaku, who would later blow everyone away with Battle Royale, Tarantino's favorite movie. That split in direction actually gives the Japanese scenes a very different tone, more grounded, more restrained. It feels like you're watching two histories playing out at once, and it works. The film was nominated for 5 Oscars in the technical categories and won Best Visual Effects, which, considering how many model ships, practical explosions, and aerial shots they used, was well deserved. Now this one's a gem that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Soldier of Orange is a Dutch World War II film from Paul Verhoeven, but this was before he went to Hollywood and made RoboCop. This is him operating at full power, but doing something completely grounded. It follows a group of Dutch university students at the start of the Nazi occupation. They all take different paths. Some join the resistance, some become collaborators, and the film follows how those choices reshape who they are and how they see each other. You can feel the moral weight of every decision. It's not a typical war movie filled with battle scenes. It's about identity, survival, and betrayal. It hits hard. Verhoeven revisits some of these same ideas decades later in Starship Troopers, but Soldier of Orange is sharper, more personal, and frankly the better film. Even a lot of Verhoeven fans haven't seen this one, but it's easily among his best. If you've only seen his American stuff, this will surprise you, in the best way. This is the original, not Tarantino's remix from 2009, but the low-budget Italian war film from Enzo Castellari. This one's scrappy. It's grindhouse. It's got a little bit of that Dirty Dozen energy, but with way more chaos. Bo Svensson and Fred Williamson play American military prisoners who escape custody in occupied France, and instead of running for safety, they get roped into a mission to steal a German V-2 rocket. No subtlety, no grand strategy, just bullets, explosions, and attitude. It's fun, it's messy, and it's pure 70s war cinema. The kind of movie that got passed around on VHS for years before Tarantino brought it back into the spotlight. And Bo Svensson actually shows up in Tarantino's version as a little nod to the original. It's not accurate in the documentary sense, but it absolutely captures the spirit of those last-ditch, against-all-odds World War II commando stories. Orson Welles once said this was the best war movie he'd seen since All Quiet on the Western Front. That tells you everything you need to know. James Coburn is phenomenal in Sam Peckinpah's only World War II movie. This isn't a war film that plays it safe. It's bloody, cynical, and absolutely relentless. Everything you'd expect from the guy who made The Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs. The film follows a German platoon on the Russian front, trying to survive as their own commander schemes to collect medals without actually earning any of them. Coburn leads the unit, and Peckinpah doesn't just throw them into chaos for the sake of violence, he gives every single one of them depth. There's character development here, you actually care what happens to them. The supporting cast is just as strong. James Mason and David Warner both give sharp, grounded performances that keep the film from slipping into caricature. And the battle scenes are rough, they're expansive and intense and don't hold back. This film doesn't romanticize anything. The German soldiers aren't cartoon villains, and they're not sanitized either. They're just men, some decent, some awful, trying to stay alive during a retreat that's falling apart around them. Bridge Too Far is massive, both in scale and in cast. Richard Attenborough directs this epic about Operation Market Garden, the Allies' ambitious but ultimately doomed plan in 1944. The film goes all in on the historical detail, and it shows. Some critics say it might go a little too deep, especially in the first hour, but once the action kicks in, it's worth the wait. Attenborough covers the operation from every angle: logistics, leadership, boots on the ground. Nothing gets glossed over. Watching it at home, you get the benefit of taking it all in without feeling the length drag you down. The cast list reads like a greatest hits of 70s cinema. Sean Connery, Michael Caine, Gene Hackman, Robert Redford, Anthony Hopkins, and that's just scratching the surface. Caine especially is in fine form here. And yes, it feels like he was in every movie that decade. Patton opens with George C. Scott standing in front of a giant American flag, delivering one of the most iconic monologues in movie history. From that moment on, the film doesn't let go. Scott's performance as Patton is loud, unapologetic, and completely unforgettable. He doesn't try to make the man likable. He plays him as he was: brilliant, difficult, aggressive, arrogant. And that's what makes the film so compelling. The script, co-written by Francis Ford Coppola, doesn't shy away from showing Patton's flaws. It's not a sanitized hero portrait. The combat scenes take a backseat to the man himself, but when they do hit, they're handled with realism and restraint. Director Franklin J. Schaffner, fresh off Planet of the Apes, keeps the pacing tight. The film runs close to 3 hours, but it never feels slow. It won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor, and it earned every one of them. If there's one World War II movie from the 70s that deserves to be rewatched every Memorial Day, it's this one. It's not just great, it's essential.